Welcome to the Raw podcast. This is a wellbeing podcast that will inspire you to create and live a life that you absolutely love. Here at Raw, we care deeply about people's physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual well-being. You know, too many of us walk this tightrope between pressure to perform and fighting fatigue from not prioritizing our well-being. We literally work through our burnout and sacrifice our work-life balance to get ahead in our careers. But there is another way, and it starts with you. I am your host, Marilise de Villiers-Basson, and this is our second episode for 2024. And today I am welcoming another amazing human, Sarah Armstrong-Smith. Welcome, Sarah.
Oh, hi, Marilise. I'm so excited to be with you today.
Thank you for joining me. I'm so grateful to have you with me today. So, everybody, Sarah is an incredible influencer in the cybersecurity space. She's had a long and impactful career in business continuity, disaster recovery, cybersecurity, and crisis management. Sarah is currently the Chief Security Advisor at Microsoft and acts as executive sponsor to strategic and major customers across Europe. Sarah is a trained PR spokesperson and international keynote speaker. She talks passionately about human aspects of cybersecurity and building trust and transparency through effective crisis management. So good to have you with me today, Sarah. And actually, people, we're here to promote Sarah's latest book, Understand the Attacker Mindset. So building a strategic security program to counteract threats. And I just want to say to my listeners, if you are one of those people who want to run for the hills right now, hearing the word cybersecurity, please stay. Sarah has a real knack for making seemingly difficult concepts accessible to everybody. Plus, you know, cybersecurity affects and connects us all. So this is a good use of your time if you want to get a grip on how to protect yourself and your loved ones from cyber attackers. And I just remembered Sarah once said something which is so profound, you know, people are the link in cybersecurity. We often talk about the weakest link, and we've completely scrapped weakest because that is just derogatory and we hate that. So we are now saying people are the link. And I think that's, Sarah, why you are so passionate about the human aspects, right, of cybersecurity.
Yeah, very much so.
Fantastic. Now I'm going to dive straight in, and I really love to go deep very quickly. And I also love hearing people's personal stories. So I'm going to dive right into your why. You know, why business continuity, disaster recovery, cybersecurity, and crisis management?
I'd have to roll the clock back over 25 years. So I'm kind of showing my age a little bit. But in 1999, I was working for a water utility company. And I had a nasty habit of volunteering for things that I didn't really know what I was volunteering for. But in essence, they needed a lot of people to come and work on this major new program. And that program just happened to be the Millennium Bug. And I think a lot of IT professionals could probably roll the clock back and say, yes, my career started from there. But in essence, my role that I was employed to do was to look at what tests had to be done on the stroke of midnight. But I was kind of then, what if? But what if the systems don't work? What if the call center doesn't work? What if people don't have water? And it kind of, what if? And I didn't know that this was business continuity. To me, it just seemed like common sense. So when someone actually pointed it out to me, no, this is actually a thing. This is a subject. I was like, this is it. This is my career. So I always kind of start my counter, if you like, from that point forth. And I think kind of the stroke of midnight came and went, the millennium, and it was cross fingers and nothing happened. And it was like, was that a waste of money? Was that good planning? So we were in the good planning bucket. And I think the company that I was with kind of spent about £12.5 million. reprogramming everything else. And I think there's a stat that says globally, the millennium bug cost $360 billion. Just in terms of, recoding, planning, this, that, and the other. So after that, I was actually seconded to our head office. I put business continuity plans in place for laboratories and engineering, but I was always drawn to IT, the technology aspect. So in 2001, I joined AXA. And I pivoted from business continuity into disaster recovery. So my job came about looking after data centers and the IT systems, but also taking the business continuity plans and testing the IT elements. Now, true to form, kind of my career, I always kind of happened to be in the right place or the wrong place, dependent on how you look at it. But after a few months of me joining, 9/11 happened. And that kind of changed everything. So at the time, it had gone from backup tape, 72-hour recovery time, and all of a sudden we needed data replication. So I spent 4 years at AXA. We went through lots of transformation and various different things. But in 2005, I got headhunted into EY. And my very, very first day on the job just happened to be the London 7/7 bombings. And I was at a conference in Amsterdam at the time. We were halfway through the morning and they said, look, we need to stop the conference. There's been major terrorist attacks in London. And they were putting all the TV screens out and we were just in complete shock. Obviously, we'd had 9/11 a few years before. Now we've had these terrorist attacks right on our doorstep. And for me at that point, I then pivoted from the business continuity disaster into crisis management. So all of a sudden, the companies really wanted to test the executive level response and kind of uplifting all of their plans and their processes. And then in 2007, I joined Fujitsu, and that was my pivot into cybersecurity. So I've been in cybersecurity ever since. But in essence, I always describe myself as being on the business side of cybersecurity. So in essence, what are we really trying to protect? And I think people are still in the mindset that cybersecurity equals technology. And to a certain extent, it does. We're here to protect, obviously, the cloud and endpoints and servers and networks. But actually, it's what's on it that's important. It's the data and the people. And that's what I'm really trying to get people to kind of think about more broadly, is really what's the impact to people, what's the impact to data. And so part of my role, I joined Microsoft in 2020, just as we were going into lockdown with a global pandemic. So I actually spent the first 18 months of my career working remotely. And through that period, I was working with multiple strategic customers, multi-sector, multi-country, kind of living and breathing some of the issues that they're experiencing. Of suddenly, I think people had pandemic plans, but nobody expected a pandemic to last for 3 years, right? And so they've had to change all their technology ways of working, at hybrid working, and even companies that have kind of come out the other end, they've really experienced what resilience actually means. And they're investing in smart technologies, new ways of working. And now we've got AI into the mix as well. So it's kind of taking all of those things together. And as I said, it kind of comes under the broader umbrella resilience, but it's always kind of been that pivot from one thing to the next to the next.
Yes. And how fascinating that you've had these big worldwide events, that sort of coincided with your pivots into new organizations. And please stay with Microsoft for a little while. Let's hope that you,
People have said that. Please do not leave, because wherever you go, there's going to be an Armageddon coming.
No, that's beautiful. And also, I think when you're on that sort of real front line, for want of a better word, of that disaster, and you see the impact it has on people's lives, that really makes that meaning so much more deeper, and it makes it so much more meaningful, doesn't it? Yeah, I mean, I think we as an industry is so lucky to have you and people like you who care so much about making impact. And yeah, I just sort of right off the bat want to thank you for that. And I love how you position all of this under the banner of resilience, because resilience, I use the pandemic as a very good example of nobody expected, as you've just said, 3 years of pandemic, and we all kind of prepared ourselves for 6 months max. And that was sort of the resilience, I think the capacity we had for resilience. And then we had to dig deeper, and we had to dig even deeper and even deeper. And I think a lot of people just really ran out of steam, really just
Yeah, very much so.
struggled so much. Yeah, so that was, I think that was kind of, for me, was the worst part of it, is how seeing how people really, really struggled. Yeah, so I'm sort of, in my intro, I mentioned that, we care so much about people's well-being, physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. But we also know that everyone experiences adversity, hardship, difficulty, danger, misfortune, and at some point in their lives, it's really important to kind of realize that you have the power within you to actually come out of that experience a stronger person, to learn from the experience, to grow from the experience. And that's exactly why here at Raw, it's our mission to help people recover from, learn from, and grow from real adverse events in their lives, And we're here today to talk about the human aspects of cybersecurity. And you mentioned that it's not about, well, it is about the technology and keeping that secure, but it's about the people and the data on the systems, on the tech, that we care mostly about, because that is the link. That is what connects it all. So really, I'd like to hear your thoughts on how falling victim to cybercrime is actually impacting people's well-being.
Yeah, well, let me roll the clock back even further to being a little girl, in essence. So, my dad was in the Royal Air Force, and he worked in psychiatry. So, in 1982, we had the Falklands War. And this was the first time since the Second World War that every part of the British military were in a war situation. At the time, we were stationed in Germany, and even kind of being a little girl, so I was only about 7, and it was really acutely aware of how different people were treated when they were coming back from the war with physical injuries versus mental injuries. And so PTSD was relatively new at that time, but it just really kind of stuck with me with regards to the psychological impact of many, many incidents, but also the stigma that comes with it. That people, if you've been the victim of a physical attack or a violent crime or anything like that, or you've been in that kind of like war situation, and people can kind of see the physical impact of that, people treat you very differently. They kind of, they give you the support, they give you the emotional support that kind of goes with it. The massive difference is really with regards to the stigma of cybercrime in particular. And again, it's a real difference between the victim blaming, the shaming, and the scapegoating that kind of go with that. And I think whether you're an organization or you're the victim of a cybercrime, like romance scams or anything like that, it's always kind of the emphasis is on the individual. What did they do wrong? The stupid user that clicked the link. Obviously, the company didn't have good plans and good processes, but there's never an emphasis on how well the attacker managed to manipulate people into doing what they need them to do. And I think that's a really important aspect of cybersecurity, cybercrime, and exactly what we're talking about, that human aspect.
Yes.
And one of the things that I'm really drawn to is the fact that we are all, whether we are the victim or the attacker, we are all drawn back to our strongest human emotions. So whether that's kind of love, hate, jealousy, pride, all of these things, these are the things that kind of pull us together. And this, in essence, is what the attackers themselves are utilizing to get people to do what they need them to do. So we'll often talk about, over 80% of all cyber attacks still start with some kind of phishing email, or message or something like that. And it's enticing the person in. How it's worded, they're either kind of threatening you, or they're trying to entice you in, or whatever the case may be. And then obviously they're trying to keep you on a hook. That's really
Yeah.
the kind of thing that goes with it. So I think people need to realize that the social engineering aspect is always tied into how people are manipulated and those kind of strong emotions. But ultimately, we kind of have to break that cycle with regards to, first of all, how we think about cybercrime, how we think about the victims of cybercrime. And obviously, the cybercrime is the initial part. What comes next is potentially the fraud, and even how people's identity can be absolutely destroyed by some of these kind of cyber attackers in particular. And that's the thing that I was really interested in with regards to kind of exploring why and we kind of have this victim blaming, shaming, and scapegoating kind of element, and what we can do to stop that in particular. And so one of the people that I actually interviewed for my forthcoming book, I really explored this area in particular. So I interviewed somebody called Dr. Elizabeth Carter. Now, she's a criminologist and also a linguist at Kingston University.
Oh, wow.
And what she's done is actually study the victims of romance scams. So what she has been able to do is take all the messages, whether that's kind of WhatsApp or emails and everything, and she studies the language that the attacker is utilizing to draw their victim in. And one of the things that she said, which really stuck with me, is the level of manipulation is akin to domestic abuse. So again, when we kind of think about victims of domestic abuse, it's very easy for somebody looking in from the outside to say, well, why don't they just leave? Why don't they just walk away? Because they can't. That's the whole point. And what you made a really interesting comment. If people understood they were being manipulated, they could do something about it. But they kind of build up this trust, and they separate people from their family or their loved ones, and they deliberately build in all of these barriers. But the thing that she said as well is the fact that they will bombard their victim at all times of night and day and expect them to answer. And if they don't answer, they put on the guilt trip, and they kind of do all of these things. And she said, sometimes the attackers will actually work as a team. So they're not always the same person. So they run kind of 24/7, take it in shifts, and they have playbooks in essence, which will be like, this is the message to send, this is how you follow up. And I think the interesting thing is, because the person then builds this trusted relationship with them, they tend to start small. They might say, oh my goodness, my phone's been stolen, or something has happened to me. But they never actually ask for something initially. They wait for the person to volunteer to give them something. And so they say, oh my goodness, let me buy your phone, or let me help you, and let me help. And that's the very first hunt. I have now got you on this rope, in essence. And then they just ask for a little bit more, a little bit more, and a little bit more. And before you know it, these people, the victims, are so ingrained and so involved into that relationship, is they truly believe they are in a relationship, and they truly believe and trust the other person. And I think, therefore, when they do find out, however far down the line it gets them, and it doesn't matter that people were saying to them, this might be a con artist, why are you giving this person your money? Why are you giving them support? Doesn't matter, because they're so invested in the relationship. And after the fact, they may find out that they've been scammed, they've been duped in some way. And this is where their own personal shame kicks in. And they're embarrassed, and they don't know how to speak to people. And they're like, and again, they feel like they're stupid. And how did I manage to fall for these things? I've given this person my trust. I've given this person my love, whatever the case may be. And that's the point. We need to give that person every single bit of support we possibly can, in exactly the same
Yes.
way as we said, if that person had been the victim of a violent crime, or they've been victim of a robbery or anything like that. We don't sit there and just blame the person. And I think it's almost going back, many years ago, when it used to be, if somebody had been raped, it was being, well, what were you wearing? And, why were you out late at night? And why were you walking home by yourself? And why shouldn't you walk home by yourself? Why stop blaming the victim and blame the attacker? And I think that's really important. And
Yes.
one of the things that Dr. Carter talked about in particular is actually having a trauma-informed approach to how we deal with victims. And that's victims across the
Mm,
board, not just individuals, but as I say, also
mm,
organizations that also find themselves in a very similar position. And what she said, if you think about the police and victim support that may be available for police, again, if they've been a victim of a violent crime, um, the police provide victim support. They give them the access to people to talk to. They might give them additional therapy, or various different things like that. And some of that, building back the trust, building back relationships, even building, how do they build back their finances, their identity, however far that person's gone. And I really think that's important. It's really thinking more broadly about the victim,
yeah.
how the attacker manipulated that victim, and what we do afterwards. It's just so too easy to just blame people or blame the
Yes.
organizations. And this is kind of to your point earlier, Marilise, this is why we have to stop that victim blaming and saying people are the weakest link. All of that has to end, because it
Yes.
doesn't help anything. It doesn't change anything. And actually what it does do is just makes these people feel even worse and more, and the trauma doesn't leave them. And I think that's the sad reality, is the
Yes.
fact that a lot of the attackers have honed that skill very, very well. And that's the point. What we
Mm,
have to be able to acknowledge, it's not the fact that people have done something wrong, it's the fact that the attacker played their
mm.
card very well.
Yes, yes, you've really hit a nerve here, because I think this is so close to my heart. The whole, I love what you say about having a trauma informed response, because I do believe that someone who has struggles with mental health, for example, falling victim, then the shaming and the blaming on top of that, so someone with a very, very low resilience and on the verge of burnout, operating in a very high performance environment, stressed, and then falling victim to something like that. And you're talking about a high achiever here, as you're saying, they're masters of manipulation. So, they trick even the smartest people, and with real deep psychology, informed approaches. Now, if you are that particular individual, so someone who's really like stressed out, tired, on the verge of burnout, and this happens, and that conversation going on in your mind, that self-blaming and that self-shaming, I can just see how that becomes a very, very slippery slope. And it would just be really great if you can tell us, what would be the advice that you would give someone like that? I mean, it's like, this is probably verging on counseling. This is not necessarily just something we can kind of say out, like, do this, do that, because we always say, oh, cybersecurity criminals are masters of manipulation and do this. But it's so easy to say, do this. What if that person is really, really struggling with their mental health and their resilience?
Yeah, I think the main thing is you're not alone. I think that's one of the things which is really important for people to understand. It's just kind of the scope and scale of kind of some of the things that we're talking about. Is there's lots of support available, but also to reach out. So no matter how bad it is, or no matter how far in you feel like you are, and as you feel ashamed and you feel embarrassed, and all of these things, other people have been in that position. And I think what's very important as well is for people to be able to share their own experiences. And we're seeing more and more of that. And I think that's really important as an individual, but we're seeing the same with organizations as well. Now, I kind of think
Yes,
backwards.
yes,
It used to be a case of, if I'd been the victim of a cyber attack, kind of put it under the carpet, hope nobody had noticed. But also, I kind of think about the media response as well, even with organizations and just how people react. It's almost like, okay, there's been a cyber breach. Let's pick through the bones like vultures and kind of make comments about it and kind of theorize about it. And that doesn't actually help anybody at all. In actual fact, what that actually does is if I then become the victim, I feel like someone's going to be attacking me and walking through everything that I'm doing. That doesn't help anybody. And I think, as I say, as an individual or a organization, it's really getting to the point where, first of all, we have to kind of, as a collective, remove the stigma that anyone and everyone could be a victim at any point in time. And I think that's a really important thing to note. So they can catch people off guard. And, this is going right up to
yes,
CEOs as well. And kind of, people who probably think, well, I'm well educated. I understand the ways of the world and everything else. But this is the important thing to verify and to think about is the fact that, sometimes you just have a bad day. Sometimes you're tired. Sometimes you're in a rush. Sometimes you're thinking about picking your kids up from school or what needs to go on the shopping list. Anything like that, you get a message come in, you're not thinking straight, you're not thinking rationally, and you might just click a link, you might just do something. And I think at some point, I think we can all turn around and hand on heart say, we have at some point done something like that. Maybe we did click a link. Maybe we inadvertently shared too much information. Maybe we put too much trust into somebody, and maybe we can all kind of look back into our childhood and right the way through some points in our lives that people broke trust for us. People who are our best friends or people we
yes,
loved or anything like that. But I think the important thing is to sort of say we have all been in that boat. So as I sort of say, you're never alone. But I think the more that we can actually talk openly and be transparent, this is really important because at least people can turn around and go, actually, I'm not alone. There are other people who've been in this situation and I can learn from them. I can talk from them. I've got that additional support. And that's really important as well, as I say, for organizations, because if you have been the victim of a cyber attack, the best thing that we can do is for you to kind of tell us what happened, what went wrong, what did you learn from it. And this is not about pointing fingers. Well, was it again? No, wasn't because the person clicked on the link and they did these things, or whatever. It's actually just really examining. As we sort of said, what did the attacker do? What did the attacker do that was so right, as opposed to what did the person do wrong? And I think it's just a different mindset, it's a different language. But the more that we can start thinking about the
yes,
positive language, being transparent, and looking at it from a learning perspective. And again, I think even doing
yes,
post-incident reviews or kind of looking backwards at things, it's really about thinking about what's the positive change that we have to make as a result of this. How do we break the cycle? How do we support the people? How do we change the process? And how do we collectively get stronger? That's the real core of what I'm
yes.
trying to really convey to people.
Oh, and this makes me so excited because this is so like I love the unified language that you're using. Like we're in this together, like normalizing the conversation around this because I think I always, when I do, the behavioral programs change programs that I've been involved in over the last sort of decade or so, we always talk about, the quicker you tell us, the quicker we know about it, the quicker we can recover, the quicker we can do something, right? So it's all about building that intelligence and that switch, that flip in the mindset of actually now we're talking about, let's learn from this. Let's not label it as a failure, but let's label it as a learning because now we can actually become more informed. We can actually begin to think like the attackers. And that's often also what we do in our education programs. We say, enabling people to start to think like the attackers and to build that attacker mindset, to really understand. And, Understand the Attacker Mindset is the title of your book. So tell us more about your book. By the way, the
Yeah, well,
launch date is the 4th of March, right?
yes. Very exciting. It's very getting very close, but it does touch on to that bit that we've just been talking about. So it's really acknowledging the human aspects as a victim, but also the attacker. So what I'm trying to do, in essence, is break the stereotype of kind of the cyber attacker, the hoodie, the dark figure, the kind of the person or the group we should all fear, and really understand the fact that there are still humans behind all of these things that are kind of going on. And again, it kind of comes back to that human emotion. And I think what's really interesting, even from a cybersecurity perspective, we always focus on the how. So what is the tools? What is the methodology? What's the process they use? So say phishing, ransomware, um, you know, 0 days. And now that's just a method. That's a method of attack. And there could be millions of those different methods. And because obviously they are, but it's just a way in which they can fulfill their objective. So what is their objective? And that's the bit I'm trying to go back with. What is motivating that individual or that group to do what they're doing in the way that they're doing it? And obviously, everything they do has to have some return on their investment. Otherwise, what's the point? So, how far are they willing to go to fulfill that objective? And that obviously comes back down to the motivation, but also the resources that they have and various different things. Now, if we kind of go back, as I said, to those core emotions, if you like. So it's a kind of a myth that a lot of cyber attackers are financially motivated, and I think a lot of them are. With regards to the type of attacks and obviously the money that could be made. And so there's a kind of a greed there in terms of I just want money, and the more money that I have. And the problem is that the more and more you have, you then have gluttony. So it's a kind of like I'm not just I can never have too many of the nice things. I want more and more of the things. And so I'm willing to take more risk. I'm willing to do more to get that money. I'm willing to go up the food chain, so to speak. So I might start small with a little organization and I go bigger and bigger and bigger. But the thing is, the more risk that person takes, the more likelihood they're going to make a mistake. So you've kind of got the money, the greed, gluttony side of things as well. And I really kind of bring this back down to, if you think about, I call it like the 7 sins of attackers. So I think these are the cardinal sins, if you like, going back to the Roman church from thousands of years ago. And these are kind of those deep rooted human emotions, as I was saying, that lead people into temptation. And those temptations lead to other temptations. So another one is lust. And so this is where the romance bit comes into play. I'm driven by the need for love and for someone to love me and to kind of draw someone in. And one of the people I spoke to, in essence, is I'm either trying to get you to love me or hate me. So you're so blinded by love, you'll do what I want you to do, or you're driven by so much fear that you will kind of do what I need you to do as well. So there's kind of a lust there, and that kind of works both ways. And so the deepest human emotions work if you're an attacker or you're a victim as well. So you've got kind of people we talked about romance scams, but you've got investment fraud as well. So the victim might be enticed into making money, into as much money. And if I invest in this cryptocurrency or invest in this new venture, I'm going to make more money. And so the attacker will show them how much money they're making. And look, they're not making any money. It's just the fact that they've got fake apps and everything. And it's enticing them. That's doing all of their things. So you're kind of level pegging with each other to a certain extent. And so then you've got the pride. The pride element is the fact that some people, some groups just want the kudos. They want their name to be in the media and to kind of be here, there, and everywhere. And look at me, look what I managed to do. I managed to break that network. I managed to take that company down. And a lot of this comes down to the activists. And that was quite interesting for me, is a lot of the activists are not driven by money. They don't care about the money. They are driven by this social justice and this need to stick up for people who can't stick up for themselves. And so, for them, they will turn around and say, well, what's the difference to somebody chaining themselves to a building versus me breaking into someone's website and taking the website down, defacing the website, stealing data, or doing all the things? It's the same principle. I have this deep-rooted need, as I say, for sort of justice. And so if you then look at some of the nation-sponsored actors, again, they're not driven by money. They don't have social justice, but what they might have is wrath and a deep-seated envy against that particular country, let's say. So what we're doing, some of these, I would look at, well, we then could look at strategic culture. So you have to understand from their perspective why they are driven to do what they do in the way that they do it. So we're guilty sometimes of looking at things through our Western lens and through our eyes and our perspective. But actually, when you see it and flip it round, actually a lot of what they're doing starts to make sense. It might not make sense to us from ours, but actually if you flip it around. And so one of the things I looked at then is, like Russia, and why they've got this deep-seated wrath and envy for like Ukraine, or why North Korea is so against USA or Japan or South Korea. But when you understand the background and the history and all of the things, you can kind of understand the motivation. You can understand why they're willing to invest so much time and energy. And the last bit around, if we kind of tied it into those human emotions and some of those cardinal sins, so to speak, the last one is sloth. And sloth people associate with being lazy. But it's actually wider than that. It's an apathy of, I don't care anymore. Whatever's happened, or whatever kind of situation we're in, I just don't care. So I kind of label this as some of the insider threat, in essence. Maybe, or even whistleblowers or something like that. It's a fact that I keep being ignored. I keep telling you there's a problem. You're not listening to me. And so you kind of get to this point where if you feel like you're going to lose your job anyway, or I'm going to lose my money, I'm going to lose my house, I'm going to do all these things. If I'm kind of in this situation, I don't care. So I'm going to sell my access. I'm going to kind of do all the things. I will commit fraud because I just don't care anymore. And the other thing, these kind of people as well, there's this I don't care brigade. They still, even all of these people still have a need for social belonging as well. So if I can tempt you into, I can amplify that deep-seated emotion that you have, and now I've got a cause for you to belong to, which is why people kind of transition from a lone wolf, so to speak, an opportunist, and suddenly, either purposefully or inadvertently, they now find themselves as part of an organized crime gang. Or they might find themselves that they just want to be, as I say, that pride, they want to be part of a group, like people want it to be part of Anonymous, because that group stood for that social justice and that kind of needing. And so that's kind of where I'm coming from, really. It's that just, if you can understand that, and you can understand the motivation, the objective, why they're doing what they're doing, even if you don't necessarily know the specific threat actor, you can kind of then have a counter plan for how you would manage and react to that in particular. So understanding how might this attacker be trying to manipulate me, or trying to get access to data, or try and kind of do these things. And if I look at that, piece of data in the hands of different threat actors with different motivations, how I manage that, how I protect it, how I think about how I deal with a breach, for example, is very different. So let's say a financially motivated actor might give you an extortion demand. And so you've kind of got that to deal with. But a socially motivated actor will just put the data straight onto the dark web without any extortion demand. So you can, and then maybe a nation state actor might be looking for really sensitive data they can use for espionage that they would use against you. And so it's the same data, but in a
Yes.
different hand, it has a different value. And so that's what I'm trying to get people to
Yes.
think about. It's not a one size fits all, but again, if we can kind of understand the human, the motivation, we can kind of counteract it.
Yeah, and then I love how you sort of embed this within the sort of psychology context, and it's that whole starting with motivation, and as you say, the same thing can have, or the same outcome could come from different motivations, and I love what you say about that shift in perspective. I think that's the key thing that I'm taking away from this, in the sense of, let's just look at it from the other perspective, and let's just flip it, as you say. Wayne Dyer used to say, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And I think
Yeah.
it's such a profound summary of exactly you've just said, and I love the grounding in the human emotions and the seven deadly sins, because I think that's really powerful, because that's how dark this stuff gets, like you really, like, there's like these light bulbs going on for me, because I'm like, this is
Good.
really deeply rooted abuse, right? This is abuse in the deepest form, and it's the deepest darkest, elements of, just, how people are driven to that sort of like real, almost like the shadow side of people. And but we always come back to the light, because obviously
Yes.
the light is a lot stronger. We want to obviously make it better, and make the industry safer, people safer. This is ultimately about people in their homes, protecting themselves, protecting their loved ones. I think so often people have a little bit of a false sense of security, like, the firewall is going to protect me, but
Yeah.
it is important to have those basic hygiene factors in place, so yeah, I am always keen, oh, thank you, Sarah. This is beautiful. I love the conversation. I'm personally learning so much, and just thinking, oh my gosh, there's so much goodness in this, that we can all, me as a cybersecurity behavioral change professional, that I can incorporate with my clients in approaches. And I come back to the Elizabeth's trauma informed response piece, because I think that is incredible. And that's the stuff that I live and breathe, as well as part of my resilience curriculum that I teach, specifically cybersecurity professionals. So there is so much gold here. Thank you so much. So I'm going to ask, just to give us some practical sort of just takeaways, literally there's one or two or three things people can do in their homes, that's going to make their sort of 80% more secure. Yeah, tell us.
Yeah, I just think it's, I think our identity as a human is so important to everything. And I think, people think, oh, we have this work persona, this person, our private life, and everything's encompassed into one. So I think first and foremost, it's really understanding what does it mean for you to have your identity and to cherish your identity. And so I think part of that is then thinking about what information you put out into the world, first and foremost, and how that information could be used against you in one way or another. So when I'm talking about that level
Yeah.
of manipulation and how people might try and build trust with you, either through your personal life, your work life, or whatever else, so think
Yeah.
about the information that you put out into the world and how much you're sharing or oversharing, and how, as I say, how that could be manipulated. So give you a good example. I use my dogs on social media to promote cyber awareness. But they're always known as the doggos. I never actually publish their names. And the reason why I do that is because I think if I publish their names, people will use that to build some kind of rapport with me. And I think it's exactly the same as if someone publishes their children's names, or what they love, what their desires are, because people will then try and copy you. They will try and emulate you. And that's how they build trust. Because if someone says, I absolutely love Fine Rise, they're so wonderful, they're, all of this. But you can see how people would do that in any aspect of your life. Oh, I see you like tennis. I love tennis. You go for walks. I like going for walks. And so it's just about not stopping sharing, but just think about how you're sharing and kind of thinking about, as you say, what that information could be utilized for. So I think that's first and foremost, is just thinking about you as a person and your information and data. The other thing to think about as well is, with our online world and how we get access to things. You've got credentials, you've got logons and everything else. But we also kind of think about, again, from the attacker's objective, they're trying to get that info. They're trying to elicit something out of you for them to fulfill whatever objective or they have. And that might be going through you to get to access to somebody else or to get access to an organization as well. So I think an important thing is, all of that kind of online persona. And there's a reason why we tell people not to reuse passwords or not to reuse simple passwords, because they collect them all up. And in essence, if I give you a stat, Microsoft is currently blocking about 250,000 password attacks a minute. So this is where someone's got access to your password and they're trying to see how many doors are open. So they kind of go up the food chain, if you like. So they might start somewhere small, as you say, like your tennis club or whatever other clubs or hobbies that you might have. And then also they'll go up retail, then financial services. And each time they collect more and more and more information. It's a really simple thing again. Instead of a password, passphrase. Something just really simple, something for you to remember. So instead of using the same password for everything because it's easy, what's the line from your favorite song or your favorite movie or something like that? So I think that's really important. But I would just also just kind of just be mindful, as we sort of that kind of assume compromise perspective is when something sounds too good to be true, or someone's being overly kind or putting pressure on you. The main thing is take yourself just out of the situation. Give yourself 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever the case may be, just to kind of sit there, think about it. And if you're not sure, ask. That's kind of comes back to exactly what we were starting with. There is so much support, there's no silly questions. If it's a friend, maybe you're a little bit embarrassed to ask your partner or your family, ask a friend, ask someone in the know. Can you just look at this for me? What do you think? What's your perspective? And just having, as I say, it's about being open and being transparent. And if you have clicked on the link, you have done something, just say so. And I would sort of flip that round as well, is we don't want to just put the emphasis on the people. The emphasis also needs to be on the organizations. And this really comes back to the culture of the organization. So what culture do you have today versus what culture you want? And I think a really good way of thinking about that is you can't just will it to happen because you want it to. You have to make a positive change. And I'd really encourage organizations to really think about when someone comes to you with a mistake, or someone has done something wrong, someone has a grievance, or someone just isn't happy about something, how do you treat them? Do you welcome them with open arms? Do you chastise them? Do you discipline them? Because if people don't feel supported in whatever they've done or whatever they're worried about, whatever they're concerned about, they'll just stop telling you. This is where this apathy comes into play. If you don't care, I don't care. I'll click the link. I'll do all the things. I just don't care anymore. So this is the thing we've got to think about, is how we stop all those things building up. And then kind of think about, okay, so you did click the link. Okay, well, let's think, okay, what do we look at? Let's think about it. What do we have to do to help people? Some of that's going to come into our processes. Some of that will come into the technology. But ultimately, it's our job to protect people, no matter if it's their personal life or into their work life, because the two are just fused together. You can't separate them.
Absolutely. I cannot agree with you more. And I love that, because we do bring our work lives home and vice versa, so love that perspective too. I was very lucky to see a little sneak preview of Sarah's book. So I know it is amazing, and it's going to be such a beautiful book in, not only in the cybersecurity industry. I think it's so accessible to a much, much broader audience. And so I would really, really encourage you, when the book drops on the 4th of March, everybody to get their copy. Sarah, where can people buy the copy of the book?
Oh, well, you can buy it online from Amazon or any major retailer. Thank you.
It's going to be called Understand the Attacker Mindset. Build a strategic security program to counteract threats. So obviously, this is very much written in a more organizational context, but I think individuals can take so much from this too.
Very much so.
So yeah, Sarah, thank you so much for joining me today. I am gutted that I cannot be at your book launch because obviously I'm in South Africa now. But I wish you an absolutely amazing, amazing event, and all the success with the book. And yeah, thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you, everybody, for listening today. Is there any
You're most
final
welcome.
thoughts
Thank
that you want to? Yeah, thank you.
I just think it's really about, no matter how bad you think it is, somebody has experienced it. There is so much support. Just don't be afraid to ask for help.
Amazing, amazing. Ask for help. And I want to just re-emphasize what we said earlier. This is about building intelligence. This is about learning how the attackers think. So the quicker we know, the quicker we can actually do something about it. And it can happen to anybody. Yeah, so thank you so much for joining us today. If you love the conversation, hit the subscribe button. We have a powerhouse of guests lined up for 2024, so you don't want to even miss a minute. And if you want to get in touch with me, you can email me at marilise@marilise-de-villiers.com. In the meantime, live your authentic purpose, stand in your power, and have the courage to roar.